it's time now for our midweek check-in with Rylan Barton, an editor with National Public Radio. And Rylan, we will begin with news this week that Governor Andy Beshear has been tapped for another leadership role, this time to serve as vice chair of the Democratic Governors Association. Tell us more about that announcement and what implications that could have for Beshear's future.
Yeah, Beshear's national profile continues to rise after his summer, where he was featured prominently in the Veep stakes with Vice President Harris as she ran for president. So he's going to be the incoming chair-elect of the Democratic Governors Association, which is it's a big political group that deals a lot with candidate recruitment, messaging, all sorts of political decisions that are going into the governor's races over the next couple of years. So he'll serve as the vice president next year when Virginia and New Jersey have governor's races on the line. And then in 2026, there will be 36 governorships up for grabs. And that's when he'll be the chair-elect of the DGA. So again, this is a big national a position, something which, in which he'll be setting the tone for what those races are going to look like in 2026. And that's something he said he's had a great interest in. He was one of the people who's, in all the post-mortems of what happened to Democrats this year, in this year's elections. He's somebody who, thinks he has an idea of what Democrats should do going forward, which is to lean into basically pocketbook issues, issues that affect families across the country, and while at the same time trying to not totally lean away from Democrats' positions on some of the divisive social issues. But he says that Democrats need to lead with those other economic issues. He said that they kind of lost sight of that in recent elections. Yeah, and again, in terms of what this could mean for his future, he's been mentioned a lot as a potential presidential candidate, or maybe vice presidential candidate, or something going into 2028, the next time that everybody will be voting on a new president and a new administration. So we'll see how this all fits together. But definitely, this is a big national pickup for Beshear.
Yes, and Democrats certainly hoping for better midterm elections than what they had this past election day. And like you said, really trying to regroup and look ahead at how they may need to change some of their messaging. Now, in light of this news, the Kentucky Republican Party, or at least I know there was a post on social media kind of criticizing the DGA's pick a little bit, saying, but the Kentucky Democrats are tens of thousands of dollars in debt, and the Democratic Party now responding to those claims.
Yeah, there is this really the most recent financial report that the Kentucky Democratic Party had to put together showed them in debt. Now, what they say, the reason for that is that there's a lot of shuffling that happens of money between all the state parties, especially ahead of a big national election. And Kentucky, for a moment, it looked like that they were in debt, but it's not as stark as it would seem. Granted, like the Kentucky Democratic Party isn't as well resourced as the Kentucky Republican Party, for sure, but it is. It was really just a bit of a financial a reporting hiccup that showed that they were so in debt. So it was a little political food fight going on after that pick. After Andy Beshear got that pick. But I mean, I think the larger criticism of Andy Beshear is really just, he's won statewide elections in Kentucky. Does that message end up working on a national level? And that's something that hasn't really been tested yet. We were wondering if that was going to be tested this year, if he'd been the Veep pick. But we're kind of waiting to see.
And then something else I want to talk to you about here is state revenue projected to decline as state lawmakers, many of them prominent Republicans, insist that they still want to cut the state income tax. They're doing that slowly but surely, I guess you would say. So what does that mean for the future of the general fund if we do see less money there due to less taxpayer dollars?
Yeah, so we know that according to the latest official report by state budget officials, that Kentucky's slated to bring in about $213 million less during the next fiscal year, which is it's a 1.4% decline. That might not sound like a lot, but when we're talking about that much money, I mean, that's a lot of money that goes to fund important government services. So Kentucky's been on this path over the last few years. The legislature passed a law that will, as long as certain metrics are met, that the state will continue to lower its income tax by half of a percentage point. So right now, the state is looking at a possible going from 4% down to 3.5%. This is coming down from 5.5% a couple of years ago. Republican leaders in the legislature say that this is still their top priority, that this is something voters are wanting the state to do. But this is also only the fourth time, apparently, that Kentucky's revenue has declined year over year, some budget watchers are a little worried that Kentucky's moving in the wrong direction here by undermining its main revenue source, which is income tax from Kentucky taxpayers. So we'll see this debate will continue on into the legislative session, because the legislature ultimately has to authorize, really sign off on those cuts going forward. They don't really automatically go into effect. And there's some other triggers that will have to be met as well for this to take place. But as of now, Republicans say that they're on track and going to try and continue doing that.
And some may recall that in 2022, they did expand the sales tax to cover more services. Was that to try to make up for any shortfalls they may see due to this income tax situation?
That's something that happens every, over the last, say, 6 years or so. Every time that there's kind of a mini tax reform package that'll move through the legislature. Whenever they lower the income tax, they'll try to expand tax to other sales taxes. We can remember back to the Matt Bevin age. This was a big priority for Republicans at that time, to move away from income taxes and more to consumption taxes, which again, budget critics will say that that's something that's regressive, especially to poorer taxpayers, because they spend a larger share of their incomes, whereas wealthier people, they're able to save a lot more of their money. So they would prefer to have less income tax and have that more spent on sales tax. So this debate will continue out in the legislature, but it's at this point, Republicans are really, they're in the driver's seat on this, and Republicans have really been doubling down on that philosophy of moving away from the income tax and more to that sales tax.
All right, Ryland Barton with NPR, we appreciate your time today. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Laura.